Okay, everybody, welcome to the August 18th edition of the Santa Barbara Airport Commission meeting. Just a couple of housekeeping matters before we call the meeting to order. I see that we have lots of people wishing to make public comment, which is awesome. There's two opportunities to make public comment, and I just want to review that with everybody. The first item, or the first opportunity, is for the public to comment on any item that is not on the agenda tonight, but within the purview of the Airport Commission. And so, a quick review: we have the consent calendar, we have administrative report on aircraft noise, and we have an administrative report on the task force working group meetings. So, and then of course the director's report. So those are items on the agenda, and the appropriate time to make raise your hand for public comment on those items is when we get to those items. If you have if a member of public has a comment on an item that is not on our agenda this evening, but is within the purview of the Airport Commission, then the time to do that will be at the very beginning, and I will look for public comment at the appropriate time. Kind of connected with that, especially when we have a lot of speakers, is each speaker is allocated 3 minutes, and a timer or a bar will come up showing you the time. And what I would ask is for everybody to be considerate of all the other speakers, and that we really would like to limit that to 3 minutes. So when you see that timer get within about 15 seconds of the end, you know that your time is just about up. If you could wrap up what you're going to say or make your final point. It's not that we're going to cut you off at exactly 3 minutes, but it's unfair to the other speakers who might have the opportunity to speak if everybody runs over. So please be cognizant of that, members of the public. And likewise, we generally, and it's in the agenda, we allow 30 minutes total for items not on the agenda and 15 minutes total for items on the agenda. I have the discretion to be a little bit loose on that, and I will, because we do want to hear from all members of the public. But I would ask the members of the public, if you're a later speaker and the person before you or someone before you has really covered everything you wanted to say, then perhaps you can shorten your comments to things that haven't been said yet, because there isn't really a ton of use of just repeating the same things. And the point there is not that we don't want to hear from you, but we have to conduct the meeting efficiently and limit the total amount of time. So if you could please keep that in mind, that would be very much appreciated, and appreciated by the speakers who would come after you. And then lastly, there's an item on the agenda called the consent calendar, which has several items. I think there's 4 items tonight. The consent calendar is generally run-of-the-mill items, things that are run-of-the-mill leases that fit a particular or fit the typical pattern that our business people handle. And it's not that we can't ask questions, it's not that there can't be discussion, but they're considered to be very run-of-the-mill things, very routine things. And so when we get to that agenda item, I will go through each of those and state what the item is. But when I get to the last one, I'll ask if there's any Airport Commission questions or clarifications. I'll ask if there's any public comment on the entire consent calendar. And if there are no Airport Commission questions or comments, and there is no public comment on the consent calendar, then I'll make a motion or ask for a motion to approve the entire consent calendar, rather than go through each item. That way we can just make it efficient. So with that, I'm going to call the Airport Commission, the August 18th Airport Commission meeting to order, and ask the real runner of the airport, Maureen Graham, no offense to Henry, to give us a roll call.
Commissioner Hopkins.
Present.
Commissioner Goodman.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Reed. I don't see that she's present. Commissioner Houghton,
Here.
Commissioner Wilson,
I am here.
Vice Chair Bowen,
I'm here.
and Chair Arcuri.
Reporting as ordered.
We have a quorum.
Okay, terrific. And do we have any changes to the agenda?
And Chair Arcuri, there are no changes to the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Henry. First up, notices that on Friday, August 13th, 2021 at 5 p.m., the Airport Commission Secretary duly posted this agenda on the bulletin board at the Airport Administration. Next is public comment on items not on the agenda tonight. So Maureen, if you would do your thing and ask for any public comment on items not on the agenda tonight.
Members of the public, if you wish to make a public comment on a matter that is not already agendized tonight, please click on the raised hand icon on your screen. It's generally in the left part of your bar there, and this informs me that you wish to speak. And we have 47 people that are logged in, and Chair, give me a moment. I have 2 raised hands, Chair. So let me get to, let's start with Francisco Chacon, and then we will, after he's done, ask Lars Faulkner. Francisco, if you unmute yourself, you can begin speaking.
Francisco, if you can hear us, you can begin speaking on your public comment on an item not on the agenda this evening. If you're there with us, Francisco, and maybe you have your mute on.
Okay, there I am.
There you are. Okay, Francisco, you've got your 3 minutes.
All right. Well, thank you, Airport Commission and administration. My comment tonight is not about anything on it, but something that was in one of them, and it's about task force working groups. We seem pretty able to put task force working groups for problems that we need to address that has to do with the airport. As for example, one of the agenda items, and I'm just referring to it, is the flight schools. And you put a task force working group together to create an opportunity to open a channel of communication surrounding needed changes related to flight instruction. Very valid. I think that's very, very important. And you refer to those people as the stakeholders. And I guess they are stakeholders to us. They are people that do business and make money off of our airport. And that's all fine. I'm fine with that. And I think everybody that has anything to do with the airport or business is okay with that. But I say we need more task force working groups to open communication between the community, the major stockholder in our municipal airport, and the people that use our airport. And my point is and a comment would be, we need to put together a task force working group for noise abatement to get a general overview of goals, objectives, and a review of policy standards. I mean, when you get over 600 complaints in a month on noise related issues, that's something that has to be addressed. You're dealing with maybe 15 people here that are using the airport. I don't know how many flight schools there are, and yet there's 600 complaints. I think we need to get our priorities in line and deal with who really is a stakeholder in our airport, and that's the community. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker,
Mo, who is our next speaker?
I'm just looking his name. I know his first name is Lars. Let me find him.
Okay, while you're looking up Lars, I just, to the public, Francisco kind of got me on a technicality there. We have, and I know there's a lot of energy and public comment and discussion around noise abatement. That is an item on the agenda. So Lars, just kind of preemptively, if that's the subject you wish to speak on, it's more appropriate for you to speak on that agenda item. If you have a public comment on something not on the agenda or related to something on the agenda, then we look forward to hearing from you.
It's noise related. So what time is that on the agenda?
Well, we don't have a specific time. It'll come up on item number, oh, sorry, here, it's item number, it's the first administrative report, item number 9. I'm guessing that'll be about 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay.
So Mo, it sounds like he's going to move to the item, to that item. Do we have any other public comment on an item not on the agenda tonight?
I have no other raised hands, Chair Curry.
Okay, we'll give everybody just a few moments. No raised hands. Okay, then let's move on to the liaison reports. And I see Council Member, or I previously saw Council Member Friedman with us tonight. So Council Member Friedman, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Chair Curry. Don't really have any updates. I know the major issue is coming up later on in the agenda. So I look forward to having that discussion, and just have been meeting with Henry Thompson and director and staff and community members on that specific topic. But we'll hear more from that item later, and that is the major item. So with that, I don't have anything else, but it's good to be here and look forward to the report and the discussion we'll have tonight.
All right, Council Member Friedman, thank you. And do we have Council Member Richards from Goleta with us tonight?
Chair Curry, I don't see him logged in.
Okay, we will move on into item number 4, and that being the director's report. Director Thompson.
Good evening, Commissioners. I have a very brief director's report for you today. But I'd like for you to please join me in welcoming Andrew Bermond back to the airport after spending 9 months downtown working with the Parks Department. You can go ahead and clap. Very excited to have Andrew back. Andrew returns as our new airport facility manager, filling the vacancy left by Jeff McKee, his retirement back in January. As most of you will recall, Andrew was previously our airport planner for many years. And when I say many years, like 10 years, and has a wealth of historical information on the airport. In his new role as a member of our management team, he will lead the facilities team in maintaining the many complex facilities and equipment we have here at the airport. With his prior experience and wealth of knowledge of the airport, Andrew is already off to a running start and is a valuable addition to our management team. So again, let's give Andrew a hand and welcome him back. Very excited about that. Please also join me in welcoming Brad Klensinger to the airport. He's not online tonight, but Brad joins us as our new supervising engineer, replacing Leif Reynolds, who retired a couple months ago. Brad comes to us from the city, where he held the position of supervising engineer at the facilities division. Here at the airport, Brad will support the many improvement and development projects that we have planned. His expertise and knowledge of the city processes will be invaluable to moving many of these projects forward in a timely and efficient manner. Brad oversees a team of 2 staff here at the airport, and he's already settling down very well into his new role and starting to address the backlog of projects that we have here. So these 2 positions are part of our effort to rebuild our team after a series of well-deserved retirements. So we're very, very excited to have both Andrew and Brad back here on the team. And we're looking forward to starting to get some things done that have kind of been waiting for us to get the bandwidth to be able to tackle. And with that, Andrew, would you like to share anything with the commission?
Mr. Chair and Mr. Thompson, thank you. It's good to be back. While I miss my colleagues in the Parks Department, I do feel like this is coming home of sorts. I just have a few brief things to share. The Public Works Department is completing this week sidewalk infill project along Hollister between San Pedro Creek and basically the administration building at Frederick Lopez Road. That closes a gap that's existed in the sidewalk along Hollister Avenue, where the airport operates and maintains about a mile of Colitas Main Street. So closing that gap, we still have a few others in there, but closing that gap allows a lot more connectivity for pedestrians, both using airport property and crossing airport property. I also wanted to point out that today marks the 10th anniversary of the airline terminal going into operation, and that you will be seeing in time a number of 10-year maintenance items that we'll be bringing either out into the terminal or for you for your review. So just be in mind that we need to stop calling it the new terminal at this point, I think. And then finally, I'll just mention briefly, we have a closure of our main air carrier runway tonight for a few hours in midnight to about 5 a.m. in order to do some center line cleaning. This is routine maintenance that we do every 3 or 4 months or so, but I just thought I'd mention it since it's happening tonight. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Deanna, you have anything for us?
Good evening, Commission Chair, Commissioners. Really, my comment tonight would be to dovetail into Andrew's comments about the celebration of the 10 years of the terminal. And you'll be seeing a number of promotional efforts on our part on social media, some of our advertising. We have a beautiful new banner on the side of the terminal. And today, to mark the occasion, we set up a station where we greeted passengers and handed out anniversary goodies and just generally thanked people for traveling through Santa Barbara Airport. So it's one of the more fun commemorations that we can possibly have. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Deanna. And Aaron, anything for us?
Just one quick announcement regarding employment that I'd like to make regarding our current airport operations supervisor. Following the departure of Kelly Reed and Quinn Martinez, we've appointed Gregory Goodsell to be our newest airport operations supervisor. Greg is the man behind the scene when it comes to one of our topics tonight with regard to aircraft noise, and he really brings a lot of expertise and technical knowledge to this. He's not with us here to present today, but I know he's listening on the other end, and I hope to introduce you to Greg in the near future. So thank you.
And then my final comment is I just wanted to share with the commission that COVID-19 remains a concern for us here at the airport. We have a number of measures that we've implemented at the passenger terminal building, but we have in fact had a few positive cases reported here at the airport over the last couple of weeks. So both staff, internal and external, are exercising caution in our day-to-day business here at the airport. But it's very much a real thing here at the airport, and just wanted to let you know that we're being very mindful of that throughout our daily work. And with that, that concludes the director's report.
Thank you, Henry and Aaron and Deanna and Andrew. So I have to say this, Andrew. I guess the grass wasn't greener on the other side of the Parks Department. Again,
I like that.
as a point of order, Mo, I noticed that Cassandra Reed, Commissioner Reed, and her cat joined us. And I'm not sure what time she joined us, and I'm not sure how you annotate that, but please note that she is and her cat has joined us. So
I
thanks
did
for
catch her.
thanks for the
Indeed.
director's report. And Andrew, it's great to have you back. Do you have any commissioners with questions or comments on the director's report? Henry, I guess that means that you're just doing an awesome job and nobody has anything to say.
Thank you. I'll take-
And I will ask if we have any public comments on the director's report. And again, and I don't want to anybody to view me harping on this is to limit things, but if the comment on the director's report is specifically around items that Henry and his staff reported, please, this is the appropriate time. If it's on something later in the agenda, please leave it to that point. Mo, do we have any hands?
Members of the public, if you would use your raised hand icon to indicate that you want to make a public comment, please do so now. I noticed that Jacques Habra, your hand has been raised for quite a while, so I'm not sure if you're wanting to make a public comment or that's just something that you clicked on. That is the only raised icon that is showing on my screen. So Jacques, would you please unmute yourself if you want to make a public comment right now?
Yeah, Mo, I'm guessing he's probably on a later agenda item. So Jacques, going once, twice, do you have a comment on the director's report? Okay, so Mo, we'll move on. We'll move on then to the consent calendar. So I'm going to read the 4 items, which are agenda item 5, 6, 7, and 8 on the consent calendar. Item number 5 is that regarding the minutes, that the Airport Commission waive the reading and approve the minutes of the commission meeting that was held on Wednesday, June 16th, 2021. Item number 6, the property management report, July 2021, that the commission received the monthly airport property management report. Item number 7, a lease agreement with Amdahl Transportation Services, Inc. Recommendation that the Airport Commission approve and authorize our airport director to execute a 3-year lease agreement with Amdahl Transportation Services Incorporated, a California corporation, for 1,054 square feet of office space in building 117, located at 705A Norman Firestone Road at Santa Barbara Airport, effective August 1st, 2021, for a monthly rental of $1,823, exclusive of utilities. And last but not least, item number 8, a lease amendment for Coastal Aviation Incorporated, a recommendation that the Airport Commission approve and authorize the airport director to execute a lease amendment to the lease agreement number 202101 with Coastal Aviation, Inc., otherwise known as Coastal, a California corporation, to modify the commercial liability, automotive liability, and environmental damage liability insurance requirements. So on that entire bulk, do we have any commission questions or comments? Looks like we don't. Mo, would you ask if we have any public comment on the consent calendar?
Members of the public, would you use your raised hand icon to indicate that you wish to speak I will scroll through the list. We have 60 attendees right now, and so it's going to take me a minute to get through. I did receive your message, Jock, that you want to speak on noise, and so I have lowered your hand. And Chair R. Curry, I do not see any raised hands.
Alrighty, well, with that, then I will ask if anybody would like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar as I read it. Looks like Dennis is going to make a motion. Is that correct, Dennis?
Yes, so I would like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Already, do I have a second? Looks like Carol is a second. So let's do Mo, if you do a roll call vote, I would appreciate it.
This is a motion by Commissioner Houghton, seconded by Commissioner Goodman for approval of the consent calendar. Commissioner Hopkins.
Aye.
Commissioner Goodman.
Aye.
Commissioner Reed.
Aye.
Commissioner Houghton.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson.
Aye.
Vice Chair Bowen.
Aye.
And Chair R. Curry.
I am aye as well.
The motion was unanimous.
Did you get Commissioner Reed? I didn't hear that.
Yes. Did I get Commissioner Reed? Yes.
Okay. Okay, so before we move on to item number 9, which is where I think we have the majority, if not all, the public comment, I have the latitude to expand the time for that. So we're going to expand that to a total of 30 minutes. But I implore, beg, and ask that everybody be respectful of the 3-minute timer that Mo will put up. We don't want to cut people off, but we need to be respectful for all the people who would like to speak on this topic. And the only way to do that is that everybody keeps their comments to 3 minutes or less. And you don't feel compelled to use all 3 minutes if you've made your point in a minute and a half. And also, I would remind people, if a previous speaker has really substantially covered everything you want to say, you could perhaps think about shortening your comments to, I agree with what has been previously said, or something like that. But again, we don't want to cut anybody off. So please respect the 3 minutes so that the people who come after you will have their opportunity to speak. And so item number 9, a presentation regarding airport noise. Henry, who will be giving that presentation?
I'll begin with some comments and then we'll hand it off to Aaron for the presentation.
All righty.
Good evening, commissioners. Item number 9 on tonight's agenda provides the commission with a briefing on aircraft noise complaints at the airport. No action is required on this item tonight. However, we have elected to provide you an update because the airport has seen a significant increase in the number of noise-related complaints received recently. While operationally, activity levels are recovering at the airport, we have not yet reached the level of flight activity seen during our record year of 2019. We have been extremely proactive in responding to noise complaints and utilizing significant staff resources to ensure that we do that. I too have responded to many complaints provided individual briefings on this matter. The airport team is committed to responding in a proactive and constructive manner. All complaints received are reviewed for adherence to our voluntary noise abatement approach, which avoids overflying sensitive areas. For those flights we observe that do not fly the voluntary approach, we review conditions to determine if there may have been operational issues that prohibited them from flying that approach. If we do not observe issues that might have prohibited the use of the approach, then we contact the airport operator and educate them on our noise program. And we ask that they make every effort to utilize the approach when it is safe to do so. The users of the airport have been very responsive to our outreach efforts. But for clarity, it's important for me that I take this opportunity and every opportunity to communicate that there is no required or mandatory flight path or approach into Santa Barbara Airport. And for further clarity, the airport, the city, the county, the state have no authority to impose such requirements. While we encourage members of the community to contact the airport with noise-related issues, and we do take those very serious, efforts designed to pad complaints are not helpful or productive and only serve to delay processing of complaints. And the reason for that is we examine every complaint that we receive at the airport to determine the flight path, the airspeed, the altitude they were at, specifically whether or not they impacted the address that's reported. We review the weather. We review air traffic control recordings of those transmissions, all in an effort to ascertain factual information on that particular complaint and the aircraft that's involved in that. Complaints with no merit also skew the data related to complaints and may serve to distract from identifying meaningful trends. We are committed to identifying realistic, meaningful, and legal solutions to this issue, and we're pursuing anything and everything that we can do to meet those objectives. Finally, as an airport, we operate in service to our community. And while our highest priorities are the safety and security of the traveling public, being a good neighbor is important to our core mission and something we take very seriously. So with that, I'll hand it over to Aaron for a presentation on aircraft noise at the airport. Aaron?
Thank you, Henry, and good evening again, commissioners. Report tonight, as Henry alluded to, just really wants, the intent is to bring this before you, just given the increase in volume. Some of our previous presentations have focused more on the technical aspect of what it is that we do, but we have that information now publicly available on our website. So I don't want to belabor your time or the public's time tonight with that. Rather, there are a few key points that I think are worthy of hitting on before we get into the public comment phase of the commission meeting tonight. So with that being said, if we could advance to the first slide, we'll get started. So what are our objectives? We're here to support the community, as Henry alluded to. That's through the providing air service options, ensuring that medevac services are coming in, supporting the military operations as they come in. And all of those indirectly support the community in one way, shape, or form, whether it be the economic impact of those operations or, general air service connectivity. But with that being said, we also need to focus on the fact that our objective is to be a good neighbor. And we do that through that complaint process Henry alluded to, where we investigate complaints and we seek resolution whenever possible. But the first and foremost priority is the safety of those aircraft operations. So we as the airport don't put ourselves in a position to jeopardize the safety, as the pilot in command is ultimately responsible for the safety of that aircraft operation. It's not the airport, it's not the FAA, it's the pilot in command. And I just want to stress that point. So what is it that the airport can do? Well, we focus on educational efforts because, as we mentioned, there are some legal issues that restrict us from imposing flight path mandates, whether it be noise curfews, things of that nature, fining, forcing folks. We have to work through an educational perspective to ensure that not only our aircraft operators are compliant, but our community is educated with what we can and cannot do, as well as our elected officials who our community routinely reach out to for support and ensuring that the airport is doing all that we can do to be a good neighbor. Next slide, please. So again, talking about what authority is where. The FAA has the separation of aircraft in flight authority, and they do this through the TRACON or approach control. They separate aircraft in flight for the intent of safety. They have the jurisdiction over airspace and the designation of said airspace. So if you think about, the Pentagon or Washington, D.C., there are some very high profile landmarks where the FAA has implemented restricted areas. And then the same holds true for even local local places like Vandenberg Air Force Base, where they can implement these restrictions. They don't get into community-based restrictions due to a volume of complaints or anything of that nature, but it's really for national security and some of those, real top secret type operations. What else does the FAA do? Well, they have differing laws that regulate what we can and cannot do. I think the one that is often most confused is the Airport Noise and Capacity Act of 1990. This law was enacted so that the airport would not have these restrictions that I just spoke of. And that was in exchange to the aircraft operators who were agreeing to adopt quieter engines as they continued to expand following deregulation and then even into the 1990s. So that really restricts our ability to restrict aircraft. What is it that we are responsible for as the airport? We're responsible for the safe movement of aircraft at the facility, on the ground, and some of the other items that I spoke of earlier with regard to education and encouraging not only the airport to be a good neighbor, but our stakeholders in the piloting community to be good neighbors as well. And then finally, as I already mentioned, the pilot in command has ultimate safety of that aircraft in flight, to include the necessary path for flight safety. And there are many, many items that one must consider as pilot in command when they are deciding how they are going to approach an airport. Next slide, please. So let's talk a few stats here. Our operations are down. Right now, we're doing about 23 to 24 operations a day with our air carrier operations. Ultimately, we were in the 30 flights per day range. So we're still down in overall operations. But one key component of that is to note that our passenger activities have exceeded the 2019 levels in the current months. This takes us back to the pre-pandemic days. So what can we ascertain from that? Well, fewer flights, but they are larger aircraft. They are no larger than the airplanes that were flying in 2019, and that we had 737s, we had Airbus aircraft in 2019. It's just been a return of those previous aircraft. But yes, acknowledged that we do have a few more of those 737 Airbus type aircraft than we historically had with our regional jets that were accommodating current community demand. What else has happened? Well, as we've been discussing thus far tonight, increased activity amongst our neighborhoods surrounding the airport. And I think it's important to note that just the complaint activity we were speaking to has doubled in July 21 over June of 21. So I will say there is a limited number of unique callers, but nevertheless, we have had the complaint activity double. And I think this is due in part to some organizing efforts within the different communities or HOAs and community meetings that are being held to discuss this topic, which is affecting folks underneath the flight path. But I will say, our legal abilities remain unchanged regardless, because we are limited by the Airport Noise and Capacity Act of 1990, which again, many of the community members we've heard from have asked us to impose the mandates, restrictions, and fines that we are not able to do. Next slide, please. So this slide just walks you through how we look at airport noise complaints. Essentially, you have two different options. You can telephone in a complaint via our complaint line. You can submit it online via our public use system. Those are the two avenues. Each of them receive equal treatment. I will say that it's a bit quicker to receive some type of response as to why that aircraft may not have flown the voluntary noise abatement approach. If you use the public view system, that is our one and only way of providing direct feedback as for that specific operation due to the volume of complaints. Next slide, please. So what is it that we see when we actually start that noise investigation? Here's a slide from a sample day in August, in the last week, as a matter of fact. And this shows the blue teal area that you see here is the Moore Mesa open space. And as you can see, there is a large majority of aircraft. And again, these are showing the commercial air carrier operations that have flown in, and they've generally flown over the Moore Mesa open space in one way, shape, or form. And I'll get into some additional stats in a moment. But I think it's important to note that, for example, the yellow dot on this on this map here represents a general complaint that we received that we investigated. And I'll get into the details of that a little bit more, but I think it's easier just to touch on this before we flip to the next slide. The other item I'd like to point out on here is our VOR GPS approach to runway 25. This is an established instrument approach that is routinely used not only by pilots who are approaching the airport during inclement weather. There may be, a cloud cover off the coast where they may choose to fly this, but this is also used by pilots who are working to gain proficiency in their flying, where they are required to practice approaches. So even on nice weather days, you may have pilots flying the VOR GPS. And if you can't see it quite clearly, there's a yellow dotted line that stretches from the green circle you see on the screen all the way to the runway threshold of 25. That represents the VOR GPS. So on this day, which happened to be a clear day, we did have someone fly that approach. And it does just touch on the Moore Mesa open space and generally keeps the aircraft offshore. Next slide, I'll get into a few more details on this image. So again, the day was August the 12th. We had 24 airline arrivals that day. And some important stats to note from this sample day: 21 aircraft arrived on runway 25 from the east, and 3 arrived on runway 7. Generally, what we see is the early morning departures, early morning arrivals are using runway 7. So 3 aircraft came in on runway 7, likely on an instrument approach to that runway. Again, I mentioned the VOR GPS approach to 25 is also utilized. And then another interesting observation here as we look at this activity, 4 of those airplanes that arrived to the airport did fly over land east of the Moore Mesa open space. So it is acknowledged that at times, certain flight crews and or aircraft operators will choose to make that approach a little bit further to the east than we've asked. But generally speaking, from what we can tell, there are extenuating circumstances, or that pilot in general is making that decision for the safety of flight. Another interesting observation, if you take a look at the activity, all but 1 airplane flew over the Moore Mesa open space, or at least touched it, I should say. So what that tells us is that our aviation community, the pilots flying these airplanes, are making a concerted effort to fly over the open space as requested as part of our voluntary noise abatement approach. But acknowledged, it does not happen in all instances. And just to give an example of some of the complaint activity that we received, the reason why we selected the 12th of August, and this one kind of came up to the front of our radar, is that the area that you see within that yellow circle on the screen, we received a complaint that 16 airplanes overflew that house that day. And then when we went back and we looked at the activity, we see that there was a large level of compliance with our visual noise abatement approach. However, 1 aircraft did come in closer to that home than perhaps the others. So just to kind of share how, there may be a perception on the ground that differs from what we see via flight tracks, we have to rely on the factual data presented before us in the noise programs that we use to generalize activity. Next slide, please. So what is it that we're doing that perhaps is a little bit different than what we've shared in the past? So one of the comments that we've heard is that the airport is often reactive to complaints. So what we've done is we've started to conduct proactive daily reviews of all commercial flight activity to see if we can get ahead of the trends, to know that it's not just the complaints that are going to generate some type of response by the airport, but if we can identify something proactively, we're going to do so. Again, we find that it's routinely related to safety. And I would say, generally speaking, yes, some days are going to be better than others, but approximately 75% of our flights do operate in adherence with our request to fly the noise abatement approach. We've increased our partnership with the FAA and airlines. We've always been in communication with the FAA. We've escalated this to a higher level now. Henry and I have been having conversation with the Western Service area, the highest administrator level there at the top, to let them know that there is community interest behind this topic. And if there's anything that you can do to help us push some types of solutions along, we're seeking your support. And if there's anything out that you can think of outside of the box that maybe other airports have implemented, or any way that you would like to steer us, please let us know. And then furthermore, with the airlines, continued outreach just to ensure that they are aware of the community's concerns as well. And then again, continued education with the community, airlines. Again, talking about all of the requests here, but first and foremost, fly the voluntary noise abatement approach whenever the safety of flight allows. The last one I want to hit on is the charted RNAV visual approach. What we found is that there are certain proprietary or airline designed approaches that have rendered a larger level of adherence to the noise abatement approach. And what we feel, based upon consultation with that airline and with the FAA, is that if we can have a charted RNAV visual, bringing folks in via GPS waypoints to runway 25, that may be a good solution for us. It won't be the ultimate solution because, again, this is nothing that's mandated, but we can request that people fly this. And it gives someone, you know, an instrumentation read on how we would request that they fly, versus just looking out the window of the cockpit at 1,500 feet, 150 miles an hour, give or take, and trying to aim for the more Mesa open space. So we do have some faith that the RNAV visual will be good for us. However, it's going to take some time. Typically, this is a 2-year process. I don't remember the exact time we started it, but we're certainly not at the 1-year point yet, where the FAA has to go through and validate this approach for safety purposes. Next slide, please. So what else has changed? Well, you know, I think we can all, you know, realize this without even going here, but 2020 was a quiet year. It was a quiet year in many aspects, particularly with aviation. Now we've returned to normal with regard to aircraft activity. It was a quiet year. So there will be an obvious change in what we see flying in the airspace. I also want to point out that the FAA Air Traffic Control Tower has been required to change procedures, and that previously they were vectoring aircraft for voluntary noise abatement approaches. FAA has come out and said that we will vector aircraft for the intent of safe operations to include separation of aircraft in flight. By doing anything more than that, they are putting the FAA in jeopardy in some type of legal liability where they have vectored for an intent other than what their orders allow them to vector for. So that has been a change. Aircraft operator standards. We've hit on this before. We had a noise report commissioned by the FAA in 2019. And what they found is aircraft operators, and if I even reflect back to the time when I first started flying airplanes in the early 2000s, you always want to have a nice stabilized 3 to 5 mile approach, if at all possible. I mean, that would be in a perfect world. What we're asking the aircraft operators to do is to conduct an approach inside of that 3 miles. It's approximately 2.5 miles from the threshold of our runway, where we're making requesting aircraft to make that what we call base turn to final, or that left turn after they come in over the ocean at the Moore Mesa open space and line up for runway 25. So we are asking them to do something that some aircraft operators have stated is potentially unsafe, and they are not going to mandate that their pilots do this. They will ask their pilots to do this when safety allows. But it is important to note that this has been brought to our attention as a potential safety issue for certain flight crews, certain aircraft, but it's all very dependent. And again, there's been no change to, generally speaking, there's been no change to the type of aircraft that we're seeing fly in here or the flight crew capabilities that are flying into the airport. Next slide, please. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and happy to take any comment or questions that may come up.
Alrighty, thank you, Aaron. Before we get to public comment, I'll ask members of the commission if you have any questions or comments. Alrighty. So Mo, why don't you start the process of, I'm sure you have lots of raised hands, and I'll just remind one final time, please limit your comments to the 3 minutes it's allocated or less. And be respectful of the people who will come after you. I'm going to use the latitude I have to extend this to about 30 minutes. But again, I would ask people to not just repeat exactly what a previous person said, because that's just not an efficient use of the time we have before us. And I think Mo said we have something like 50 people. Some quick math at 3 minutes, as there's just really no practical way to get to all those people. So we're going to do the best we can this evening. And Mo, take it away.
Great, thank you, Chair Curry. Please use the raised hand icon. I do want to note that there are 70 attendants, so it is going to take me a minute to get through the raised hands. Barry Colwell, you will be our first speaker, so if you want to start unmuting your mic and getting ready to speak, I'm going to name a couple of people who are next so you can also get ready. Bruce?
Yeah, Mo, I was going to suggest exactly that, which is maybe we could queue up 3 people, the first speaker, the second, and the third, so that those 2 people are kind of ready and organize their thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, so Barry Colwell, you'll be our first speaker. Bruce Lyondick, I probably mangled your name. I apologize for that. You will be our second speaker. And Eric Seal, you will be our third speaker. So Barry, take it away.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you to commissioners and support staff for making this possible, particularly to Aaron for making a lot of transparent information out there. Very helpful. I'm just real quick, I want to, for the sake of other speakers to be quick here. I basically am calling to talk about 2 things. One, the increased noise and occasional flight path deviation that everyone's talking about, but also to the plans of UCSB to build a very large 11-story student housing complex, basically right on the border of the airport. I am a retiree from UCSB involved with development out there, so I have some information about that and some concerns. But basically, real quick, I'm a 62-year-old retiree from UCSB, as I mentioned. I'm in the Turnpike, Patterson, Hollister area corridor since 1959. I've witnessed Trade Corps. I used with the 747s and the Guppies with fondness. I used to go out with my grandfather and watch planes come in for the Trade Corps updates and have dinner upstairs. So I'm on the fence here. I'm very much an airport supporter, but also I'm very concerned about the growth that's happening and some of the related issues, in particular the 2 that I just mentioned. So again, my first concern is the noise and occasional flight path deviance. I came in on a Southwest airline flight about a month ago, and the equipment was late getting out of Phoenix, so we took a direct path right over most of Santa Barbara, and I was thrilled. I enjoyed it. It was a clear night. It was beautiful. I was happy to get home, and I thanked the pilot like I always do when I got off. And he said, "Oh, thank you. It's my first time in Santa Barbara." So I didn't mention to him that his flight had deviated from what I was used to for decades. So I think in that sense, more pilot outreach and education about the preferred flight paths when it is safe is probably of really high concern for a lot of people here. But then again, on number 2, on the Munger project, if anyone wants to go and look, there's public information out there on there. Currently, it states it's actually 11 feet higher as proposed than the FAA allowance currently, so there will have to be a variance for that. Also, it is currently 65 feet higher as proposed than the current UCSB long-range development plan with the Coastal Commission. So I have just questions about whether there's been effort to coordinate with that project and the stakeholders involved. Thank you very much. Again, I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Barry. And we have Bruce next. Bruce or Maureen, can you reset the timer?
Oh, Yep.
Am I unmuted?
Hold on one second. Bruce will be right with you. There we go. Bruce, take it away.
Hello there, I'm unmuted, right?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Well, thank you, commissioners, for your work and your service, and we really appreciate it. I've lived on the glide path for 30 odd years, and I'm one of your customers on the noise complaints. I've been pretty active on it. I read something on the airport website that really got my attention, and I want to laser focus on Mr. Keller's remarks about the RNAV GPS approach that they're trying to get approved by the FAA. I looked at the history of my complaints, which are a few dozen over the last few years, and one airline is conspicuously absent from these complaints, and that's Alaska Airlines. And guess who has this proprietary software GPS system for RNAV? It's Alaska Airlines. They don't fly over my house. Southwest, American, United, you name it, they all fly directly over my house on the glide path. So I want to inform the listeners of this meeting how crucial this is for noise control, because I'm a direct sample of how effective this is. And by the way, referring to the last caller, Southwest Airlines, they are skimming my treetops over my house here. They really need to learn how to approach Santa Barbara Airport, but that's not my point. My point is RNAV, that's going to solve a lot of headaches for a lot of people. Thanks for your attention.
Bruce, thanks for being concise. We appreciate that. And Maureen, I think you had, actually, would it be easier for you, Maureen, if you call the people, since you've got the huge list in front of you?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay.
So Eric Seal, you are next. Francisco Chacon, you will be after him. And Gregory Novak, you will be the third one in this series. So Eric, it looks like that you may be inactive.
No, I'm active.
Okay, great. So go ahead.
Hi, everyone, and thanks to Aaron for your report. I particularly like the slide that showed all the paths arriving on August 12th, which you used as an example. That slide was called Aircraft Noise Update Complaint Investigation. What I found useful about it was it showed us exactly what happened on that day. And I suggest that the commission publish a map like this regularly, from my point of view, daily, ideally, to increase transparency and build public confidence in compliance with the voluntary noise abatement guidelines. With a map like this, the public could see exactly how many flights are and are not compliant. I understand that the public already has a way to see an aircraft's flight path, and maybe there are many, but the one I happen to know is a website called airnoise.io, which provides a link to an image of the flight path on flightaware.com for any flight that the user submits a complaint about. So I know there are ways to see individual flights, but the slide that Aaron showed is really, I think, more to the point in that it shows the distribution and frequency of flights landing in Santa Barbara. So that's a suggestion. And separately, I have a question. Don't know how you answer it, but a question in my mind is, I think the information that you submitted was for commercial flights. Does this commission also have jurisdiction over and data on private flights, which I suppose would be subject to the same voluntary noise abatement guidelines? And that's all I have. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for being concise. It's very much appreciated by the speakers who are to come.
Francisco, all right, can you unmute your mic and begin speaking?
Okay, thank you, commissioners and administration again for letting me speak. I just want to say that there is a lot more air traffic come through. They're coming through too low and too loud, and it's a safety concern. And, you know, when you have close to 600 complaints in a month, that's a problem. That's something that has to be addressed. And we're not talking just something that just happens and it's not a big deal. And then I kind of took offense to Mr. Thompson's remark about padding the complaints. And yet you look at the complaints and you have a lot from Hope Ranch and Mora Mesa, and they're mentioned in your presentation here regarding aircraft noise, particularly from the Hope Ranch and Mora Mesa neighborhoods. Well, guess what? They padded their calls, didn't they? Anyway, and also the language that was used in this thing about disinformation. How can you have disinformation? Disinformation is false information, which is intended to mislead, like propaganda issued by a government organization to a rival power or the media. It was actually started by the Russians in the 1950s. That is not the appropriate language that we need to talk to our community with. That being said, we do need to do a lot more to address this. And I thought we need to be more informed. And I think those task force working groups were something that we can use. Let's get a task force working group of different neighborhoods in the area like we used to have. Like 30 years ago when I was here, we had a noise abatement committee that put out reports. We should do that again. And you talk about the safety of the passengers and airlines, but the safety of the people on the ground, the major stakeholders in our municipal airport, that is what is important. I mean, these people have one chance in their flight to have a problem. We have, what, 21 times a flight to come over? The thing that's getting us is like the air pollution, the noise pollution, and the psychological terror of these things coming in so low and so loud. We need to budget for noise abatement. We need to put together a task force working group out of the local community stakeholders to make this more clear and transparent so that you don't think that we're producing disinformation. We need to clear it up and make it transparent. We need to have people involved in the community, the stakeholders. And I, for one, am ready to join and try and work this out, think out of the box. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Francisco.
Our next speaker is Gregory Novak, and let me give a couple of other speakers the opportunity to prepare. The speaker after Mr. Novak is Jacques Habra, and then Janet Rogers. Okay, Mr. Novak, if you would unmute your mic and begin speaking.
Okay, yeah, I believe I'm unmuted. Is that correct?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
First of all, of course, I'd like to thank you all for being here and hearing us, the commissioners. I'm a retired airline pilot that does live in the Mora Mesa Shores area, and I think I represent a lot of the residents that live here. I'd like to keep this into a constructive conversation, of course. A lot of what Mr. Keller said, it sounds like it's out of the airport's hands as far as we're doing the best we can. It's all up to the FAA. So who do we need to contact to help this situation? Because I do agree with the previous caller in many aspects. It really has gotten out of control. I mean, I have Southwest passing over our house at 100 feet AGL, and they're way off the flight course. I know they're making an effort to do better. Then, of course, there are a lot of the corporate airplanes that come in here, which perhaps might be, as the previous caller spoke with the Southwest crew, this is their first time in Santa Barbara, so they're totally unaware of what the proper procedures are. And as you also spoke that, these are all voluntary procedures. Well, I agree they are. Do we need to move to something like Orange County has, where they are required procedure, that if the pilot does not adhere to that procedure, he is violated? I'd hate to see it come to that. But if we don't get some sort of resolution to this, I think we're going to have to move in that direction as residents of the community. But again, I'd like to keep this as a constructive situation where we work with each other, work with the airport. I was hoping the airport would be, a little more sensitive to our needs But again, I'm not saying that you can do that because it sounds from what Aaron told me that you can't. So who do we talk to? Do we talk to the city, the city council? Do we talk to the FAA? I don't know if you can answer these questions, but there are a lot of things that, you know, we can improve upon, especially with the morning departures. I know we have a departure going to Denver at 5:30 a.m. that wakes us all up, and then there's 5 more departures before 7 a.m. Typically in the morning, I know the field is IFR, so they have to use runway 7. That sends them right over our community over here. On clear days, okay, would it be possible to divide up the noise and send them over to the east? It would be utilizing runway 25. I know a lot of you would say, well, it depends on the weather and wind conditions, but typically, first thing in the morning, the winds are calm. If not, they're three knots out of the north, which does not preclude runway 25. I know there are communities out there over the departure end of runway 25 in Elwood that would be impacted by this to the west. But what it would do is help break up and share the noise, but we're not getting it all, and then getting it all also on a VFR day. But again, I hope I'm not being too offensive here. I don't mean to come across that way, but it really is. I mean, we've been here for a while in this community, and it really needs to be helped in some way. Thank you very much for hearing me.
Thank you.
Janet Rogers, you're up next.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone who is here and is giving us the opportunity to kind of express the effect that the airport has, you know, that living close to the airport has had. I'm very interested in the RNAV visual that Mr. Keller informed us about, and I hope that that continues to be pursued and that could possibly help for us. The previous speakers have really asked good questions and made good points. And I would just short and sweet, like to just read something that I actually sent in. And just to give you kind of the emotional feel for those of us on the ground here. So what I said was, we live at 650 Gwynn Avenue, just north of the recommended incoming flight path for aircraft approaching the Santa Barbara Airport. The recent 2 to 4 year increase in frequency, times, and size of incoming aircraft is dramatic. To make an analogy, it is as if we purchased a home near a country lane and now we live near a freeway. The constant noise of low-flying aircraft directly overhead is an incessant disruption to daily life and sleep patterns. Conversations must stop, phone calls are interrupted, and radio, TV, and music are drowned out. This affects our mental health and well-being on a daily basis. We have been assured that pilots are apprised of the recommended flight path over largely uninhabited areas, but very, very few actually follow that path. The price of offering so many choices of flights to the community is being borne not by the community as a whole, but by a very few, and it is exponentially worsened by the choice of pilots to routinely ignore the recommended flight path. We ask that the recommended flight path be enforced to the full extent safely feasible. So thank you for listening to that. And I understand that that pilots are being informed of that, and that many of them are following that as closely as that they can, and we appreciate that. And again, I'm really hoping that this RNAV system can really help us in the future. So thank you so much for your efforts. Thank you again.
Great. Okay, Lars Fackler, you're next. Let me queue up the couple folks behind you. Lisa Patterson, you'll be after Lars, and Lorelei Moosberger, you will be after Lisa. Lars, can you unmute yourself and begin speaking? Okay, I'm not hearing you, Lars. Can you hear me? If you can, if you would unmute yourself and begin speaking. Okay, we will come back to you, Lars. Lisa Patterson, if you are available, would you unmute your mic and begin speaking? Lisa Patterson. All right, we will come back with you, Lisa. Lorelei Moosberger and Mark Shevitz, if you would prepare to speak after Lorelei. Lorelei, please unmute your mic. I see you are unmuted. Begin speaking.
Hi, thank you very much. I'd like to echo what most of the speakers have already said, and I'd like to make some comments, not in order of importance. I have called so many times I cannot count about noise to the phone line. And I have left my email all the times, and I have never received an email back. I do not get the impression that I am being heard at all. In fact, at one point, I have never gotten an email back. And I asked that I be given an email just to know if I should even bother. So rather than focusing on the potential of padding these calls, I'd like to state that I know many of my neighbors never call, and there are many, 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 many times that I do not call when planes are flying too low and even more north of the recommended flight path than Janet Rogers, as I live in the 500 block of Gwynn Avenue, so another block north. And I also want to state that I too have a problem with the noise interrupting my daily life. I taught all summer online at UCSB, and I regularly had to stop my class because the planes were so loud directly overhead. Another point, I do not believe all of the airlines are equally disregarding these flight paths. And in fact, Southwest Airlines has flown so low that it is truly frightening in my home many times. I also want to state that I understand that there may be safety concerns. I do not believe that those safety concerns are always the reason that we have that are not in the flight path. For example, there is a United flight that comes over my home at around 9 p.m. nearly every single night, if not every single night, and I am not supposed to be in the flight path. So I think that it is probably true, it is most things, that about 20% of the flights are the source of 80% of the problems. So should you focus on those flights and be able to report to us which flights are the problems, perhaps we can all direct our energies more productively at the offenders. Okay, I think that's it for me for tonight, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to go back. I skipped over Jacques Havre. Jacques, if you are available, would you unmute your mic and begin speaking? I'm hearing, is this Jacques Havre speaking?
Accuracies of the recording on Alex's app. When we check, what's the altitude of that? It said 700 versus feet, and we know it's 300. Well, that's not the airport.
Hello, is this Jacques Havre speaking?
Well, why don't we move on to the person. We've got folks, we've got about 10 minutes left of what will be about 35 minutes, and I really want to give everybody the opportunity to speak. So you have 3 minutes, but if you can do your best to say your piece and let the next speaker speak, that would allow us the opportunity to get as much public comment in as we can.
Okay, Lars Fakler, let's go back and see, are you able to unmute yourself and speak? Okay. Lisa Patterson, are you able to unmute yourself and speak? Okay. Mark Shevitz, are you available?
Present and accounted for.
Great. Please start speaking.
Okay, well, thank you all for this opportunity and the information presented this evening. I can assure you, no one's asked me to call the several times that I have called, that I'm not a member of a group. I am just a homeowner. The presentation was enlightening, and I just, one piece that was mentioned, and I hope the commission reflects on, is that the number of flights are down from our peak, but the number of passengers have increased above that peak. And so while maybe we had 737s coming in here in 2019, I had already retired, but I am 3 million miles on American and 2 million on United. I've never flown into Santa Barbara Airport on a 737. So I think that, well, maybe that equipment was available. You guys know better than me. I'd say the number that are coming in is more of an issue than whether they were coming in, and your passenger rate clearly shows that. The other point that was made by a previous caller, again, I just don't want it to look, is we've been dealing solely with commercial flights. I'm really curious the number of private flights that we see in a median day. I suspect from my traffic over my house that Thursday and Sunday are much higher than other days. So I think that would be a very interesting piece of information to know. In terms of what other suggested, it's a safety issue. As a person who is underneath those planes, when it's a safe and a reassuring explanation to me. I've talked to friends who are pilots, and they tell me when they fly into Santa Barbara, it's just to have that nice 5-mile glide path or 3-mile glide path to make it nice for their passengers. Well, again, so many good comments from other folks today. Who's your constituencies? The guys who are flying in private planes, or those who are coming for a weekend in Santa Barbara, or the people who are paying our taxes here and who are supporting this airport? Thank you very much.
Okay, one more time, we'll try Jacques Havre. If you would unmute your phone and begin speaking. You are unmuted on this end. Okay, we'll check in on Lars Fackler or Lisa Patterson. Do either of you have a public comment you want to make? All right, Max Rosenberg, you're next in line. Then there's Michelle Paola and Richard Campbell. Max, if you would unmute your phone and begin speaking. Max? Okay, Michelle Paola, are you able to unmute and begin speaking? All right, Richard Campbell, are you able to unmute your mic and begin speaking? Richard Freeman, are you able to unmute your mic and begin speaking?
Sorry, I unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, this is Richard Campbell. Sorry, I thought I had unmuted
Great.
myself.
Great.
I'd like to say I'm pro airport. I think every thriving community needs an airport. Having said that, I think the operators at the airport need to be a little bit more sensible. I'm a little bit surprised to hear that the commission can't do anything. I suspect if I rented a plane and flew in over the rooftops, maybe I wouldn't be allowed to land at Santa Barbara Airport again. And I would imagine the commission has some say who gets landing slots at Santa Barbara Airport, and airlines who don't comply and aren't respectful of the community around the airport should maybe be told, well, you've got your slot, but you're not getting any more. It's just a suggestion. I don't know what's legally possible or not, but I would have thought you probably have a little bit more say as to who lands at your airport than you're letting on. I think when you have a pilot, a retired pilot, making the comments you made, you've got to sit up and listen. I agree with the suggestion of publishing the flight paths on a daily basis. I don't know how much work is involved. I'd imagine that could be automated, and I suggest you do that. There's a lot of talk about weather and safety and so on, and I think it's important that it's safe for everybody around, including the people on the ground. But, you know, having lived in the UK and in the Caribbean and traveled extensively around the world, the weather here is pretty stable throughout the year. And as we saw on the 12th of August, there were no, wild weather patterns on the 12th of August, although there were drastically different approaches into the airport. And, shouldn't it be standardized unless there is a safety or necessity? It doesn't appear to be the case, okay? And it appears to be certain aircrafts which are the repeat offenders. I was a little bit surprised to hear Mr. Keller talking about a pilot looking out of the window for Moore Mesa at 150 miles an hour and 1,500 feet. I would have thought planes are equipped with equipment which can put them on a dime. A $300 sat nav will do that for you in a car. So, talking about pilots not being able to find Moore Mesa, even in foggy conditions, is ridiculous. Planes have been equipped for decades with equipment to make them approach airports in the UK and land in the fog since the 60s. That's all I have to say. And thank you for listening.
Okay, Richard Freeman, are you able to unmute yourself and begin speaking?
Mo, this is Craig. While we're waiting for that person, I'm afraid in the interest of time, I'm going to ask you not to go back to somebody if they're not able to unmute. Just in the interest of time, I'd like to get as much public comment in as I can. We're narrowing down to about 5 minutes left. I'm going to extend that just a bit. So Mo, when you call somebody, if they're not here in about 10 seconds, just please move on to the next person. And I'm going to ask you not to go back to the previous person.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Curry. You are all unmuted, so when you hear your name, you need to unmute yourself and begin speaking. So Richard Freeman, are you available? Okay, our next person is Robin Beadle. Are you able to unmute yourself and begin speaking? Saffron Ego, are you able to unmute yourself and begin speaking? Stina Hans, please unmute your mic and begin speaking.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Well, thank you very much. I thought I was at the end of the line, so pleased to be able to not be at the end of the line. And thank you all so much for your time. I have to echo a lot of what the previous speakers have said. I use a piece of software called Flight Radar 24, so that when an airplane flies over my house, I can take a screenshot and I know exactly what the airline is, what the aircraft is, what the time is, and what the altitude is. So I was particularly interested in two things, would like an answer if I could. Since I use that software, I use the complaint hotline, and I report the time, the flight, the blah, blah, blah. Does that make a difference? Is that worth my time in reporting? I have not reported August 12th. So when Mr. Keller mentioned that, I pulled up one of the screenshots for August 12th, American Airlines Flight 1981 from Dallas to Santa Barbara at 1237 feet over my house in Hope Ranch. And I haven't reported it yet, but I don't know if it was on Mr. Keller's presentation. So I guess my first question is, does the hotline work? Is it worth reporting? And when I've talked to pilots, some of them who are experienced have said they have been asked to join a flight pattern that is in the noise sensitivity area. They have told me that they know what the vector is that they should come in at. So they have requested permission to come in on the appropriate vector. I know you say that pilots are in control, but if they've been told to come in on a vector that is over the noise complaint, noise sensitivity area, who's really in charge there? So I thank you. I know this is long and tedious for you all. And should I continue to report? Or is it a waste of everybody's time? Thank you very much.
Susan McMillan, if you are able to unmute yourself and begin speaking, you are next. Travis Johansson, are you able to unmute your mic and begin speaking?
Yes, hello. My name is Travis Johansson. I'm a homeowner in the area between Patterson and Turnpike. I have noticed some of the expanded noise in the recent time, as everyone else has been explaining. I think that this may be difficult for some of the commission to take action on because, as noted, it seems like there's not enough authority there. I do believe that this may constitute a public nuisance and that the Board of County Supervisors for Santa Barbara County would have the ability and authority to impose a version of an emergency order in the near term to figure out how to address that going forward. And I think it would be easy to roll back to essentially where we were in April, because I believe there was an expansion of flights or flight paths by the airport in April. So that may be one option. I really do like this suggestion of maybe requiring an expanded type of software for the airplanes. And I think that's pretty much it. So I'll let someone else speak at this point. Thank you.
Maureen, I'm going to ask you to do three more people only. We're at about 40, we'll be at about 45 minutes here, and to make this as efficient as possible, trying to get everybody in. And if those of you who are present don't get an opportunity to speak, of course, we'll be meeting again in a month. And in the meantime, I'm sure somebody on the commission or the staff will make a point of pointing out how you can reach out in between. So Mo, three more people, including this next person.
I can unmute myself now. Lars Fackler, thank you.
Lars, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Sorry, technical difficulties. Wasn't able to unmute myself on the cell phone. Said the organizer had to unmute. Anyway, thank you for your time and your service. Wanted to provide a little different perspective on the theory that there might be more community organizing regarding flight complaints. I think reason why you might have seen doubling of flight complaints since July is because that's when airplanes started to deviate from the established arrival flight paths. I live across from Earl Warren Showground. So basically Las Positas and the 101 freeway. So I'm council members Friedman's district. And, you know, freeway's there. Can't really complain about that when we bought our house in 2004. Then the hospital adds the helipad. You know, we get some helicopters, they save lives. I'm okay with that. But then all of a sudden, about a month ago, multiple airplanes, especially jets, started flying over our house. And this was not just American Airlines, United Airlines, also private jets. And I don't know what prompted that change. And it wasn't like a one-time thing. It became a daily thing for over a month now, where we have 4 or 5 jets, usually 2 or 3 private ones, 1, 2 commercial ones flying over a house, which never happened before. So I'm not sure what happened there, but the theory that people are just organizing more, like I said, I just wanted to provide a different perspective that this probably might have to do with the fact that all of a sudden these airplanes are coming in from over the Mesa, flying over the freeway, and then approaching Santa Barbara Airport. Not sure what can be done, but I think that might be another area that you should look at is why is it all of a sudden that a lot of these airplanes are deviating from established flight patterns? No offense, we didn't buy a house, in an established flight path. We got the freeway, got the helicopters. Usually I don't complain. On this one, I thought it was time, and I appreciate your attention. Thank you.
Adrian Shuali, if you are able to unmute your mic and begin speaking, please do so. Hewitt Lang, if you are able to unmute your mic and begin speaking, please do so.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your attention. And I'm not familiar with any of these technical aeronautical terms, except I could tell you I live in the Braemar Ranch area. The elevation of my house is about 300 feet, and I've lived here for 43 years. And I could tell you there's been a quantitative difference in what has gone on over the last year. It's dramatically different. There's a dramatic increase in the jet noise, especially at our elevation. Of course, safety is the most important thing. We all want that. But I think this is a real problem. I'm calling representing my wife and my dog. So it's not padded more than those two living creatures. And I do agree that I have many acquaintances who haven't called. And so I think it's a real problem, and I hope that the commission addresses it. And I thank you for your attention time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maureen, this is Susan McMillan. I finally figured out how to unmute myself.
Okay, Susan.
This is Jacques Cabra, and I also figured it out. So everyone knows you have to use a PC. It's important in future commission meetings that you point that out to your audience. You cannot use a mobile device. So people like me who have a crying baby who wants to sleep and use the mobile device, they have to change to a PC and be near the baby. So that's why you couldn't hear me the 6 prior times, nor many other people. You have to use a PC, not a mobile device. But I'll wait my turn again. Thank you.
Okay. This is Susan McMillan. I'll be really quick. I live in Hope Ranch. I just wanted to address the commercial, the non-commercial flight issue. I periodically track flights using AirNoise.io, and I just looked at my 3-week trend. And again, I don't track every day, all day, but in the 3.5 weeks that I was looking at, there were 15 private non-commercial flights that were well below the 1,000 mark threshold. So I think that that's something that we need to focus on, and it would be great. Just want to reiterate that if you could get information on those, the private non-commercial flights, that'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Mark Shevitt's book. It's very
Okay,
good.
Mo, and I'm going to ask you, Mo, to ask for one last caller and take it away, Mo.
Okay, Jacques, if you would start speaking.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So as noted, please indicate to all of your audience that they must use a PC to participate. They cannot use any sort of mobile device. My name is Jacques Cabra. I live in the Moore Mesa Shores community, and the noise increases over the last 6 months have been incredibly profound, as everyone has said on this call. And there's a few issues I'd like to clear up. I'm also a private pilot. Number one, there are other options. If there's a weather issue, if your IFR conditions, it's not a requirement to fly over residential areas. And even in that case, it is never allowed, and this is a FAR, this is an absolute requirement to stay above 1,000 AGL. These aircraft, Aaron, are way below 1,000 AGL, okay? They really are, and we need to study that. In the month of July, I took some stats because we are woken up every morning. I thought I'd make use of my time at 5:30 in the morning. Out of 31 days, 27 days, there was at least one aircraft between the hours of 5:30 a.m. and 7 a.m. that flew below 1,000 AGL over residential areas and not following the very strongly encouraged pattern over Moore Mesa. There were 16 days where there were more than 3 aircrafts during that time frame. So this commission needs to take this extremely seriously. It's a safety issue. It's a nuisance issue, and it needs immediate addressing, not something we shell and we discuss next month. We need to create a task force like one of the early speakers suggested. We need to find out who and how to gain the authority for people like Aaron and Henry and other authorities to have greater controls over guiding the aircrafts away from residential areas and reducing this noise nuisance that is continuing nonstop. So that's my feedback. We need some action items. We can't just look at this and say, well, this is a weather issue or a safety issue. These are not mutually exclusive issues. We can be safe and still address safely the noise issues. And I think I speak for a lot of people that it will certainly improve our quality of life and also just the whole Santa Barbara experience. It shouldn't be this noisy. Thank you.
Okay, Mo, I'm going to ask you to close off public. Oh, there we go. Okay, I was muted there for a moment. Sorry about that. So Mo, I'm going to ask you to close off public comment on this topic. I know there are more people who want to speak. I will, before the adjournment of the meeting, I will ask the appropriate member of the admin staff to just repeat the various ways that members of the public can get information to the airport about noise complaints or questions. And I encourage you, if you didn't get a chance to speak tonight, to join us at the next airport commission meeting and use your 3 minutes there. So take a breather for a second and go around the airport commission members to see if you have discussion items or questions. I see either blank faces or no's, so it doesn't look like we do. In which case, we'll move on to our final.
Wow.
Final item. Did I hear a question? Nope. Okay.
I just amazing after all those comments that no one is making a comment from the commission right now.
So we'll move on to Mo. Can you mute everybody but the
Wow.
The staff here?
Ridiculous.
Eric Friedman has
comment from the commission whatsoever. Hard to believe.
You guys are really giving us a lot of confidence.
Well, I will comment. I thought that Mo was going to poll us, and so I was waiting here, half asleep, waiting for my name to come up. But I would like to thank all of the members of the public who have shared their thoughts and their comments with us tonight. It is in fact very important to the operation of the airport. And also, thanks to Aaron for his presentation, I found the radar approach tracks to be very helpful. And I think that keeping an eye on those is a very good idea. Thanks again to all of you.
Councilmember Friedman, it looked like you had something to say.
Thank you, Chair Curry. I was waiting to the end to speak if the commission want to speak, but I do want to first just thank all those who spoke tonight. I know I've personally been in communication with many who have emailed me personally. Earlier today, myself and Councilmember Jordan met with Director Thompson and Aaron with a few residents who are connected to different homeowners association groups to have a more in-depth conversation, and we're continuing to meet with individuals who contact me or respond directly to you. But I would like to say that it's important like this to hear directly from the public and also for the commission to hear, but it's also important that we at the city explain clearly to you, the public, of what we can do, but also the severe limitations we do have. We are frustrated at the city. I've talked with Director Thompson about this, the city administrator, both Paul Casey and the incoming city administrator, interim Rebecca Bjork, about this issue, because it is affecting the quality of life the residents throughout the city, not just those who are neighboring the airport, but those who are further in town now, up on the Mesa. And Mr. Habra spoke earlier over talking about Yankee Farm Road in that area. So it is a concern, and we are looking at how we can improve our response in the areas that we can, continuing to engage with the FAA and those the federal government, including our congressman, so that he is aware of this and he's been briefed on it. And so that's where we're trying to do. And right now we're gathering more information. We can there are some great suggestions today on posting this, making it more accessible and where the flights are going, but also looking at the difference between the commercial as well as the private flights, and seeing if there are some differences with private flights because of, or sometimes even the flight schools, if we do have some regulation that's there. So I just wanted to briefly state this. I know I'm the liaison here, but to let all the publics that spoke today to know that we are taking this very seriously. The council is aware of it. And like I said earlier, myself and Councilmember Jordan, who's been receiving a lot of this, have been meeting with individuals one-on-one or in small groups, and we'll continue to do that. But I think ultimately moving forward, look to the commission for some guidance from them as well as they look at this issue. You have a lot of dedicated individuals on the commission who go back many years on the commission or in the community. So we will be seeing how we can work, the council, how we can work with the commission and our staff to continue to do that. So that's what I wanted to say. I know it's not taking action tonight because we really need to get information on what we can do, but it's really sharing that. So just again, appreciate all the comments tonight, and they are being taken to heart.
Thank you, Councilmember Friedman. Okay, we're going to move on to the last item, item number 10, administrative report regarding the presentation of the task force working group meetings. A recommendation that the Airport Commission receive a staff presentation regarding the task force working group meetings related to flight instruction for the updates of the SBA minimum standards.
Okay, and Aaron will make that presentation.
All right. Just want to make sure everyone can hear me. My computer was doing something a little funny here. Yes, okay, wonderful. So before I get started here, Chair Curry, just to address your comment about, for those that did not have the opportunity to verbally address the commission tonight, SBA public comment at santabarbaraca.gov is where public comment can be submitted. That is an email address that is checked regularly. So if you weren't able to speak, or if you wish to put your comment in writing, you can certainly email to that address. And again, that is SBA public comment at santabarbaraca.gov.
And Aaron, before you move on, could you describe the other way, the automated, I forget what we call the system, specifically for a noise complaint. Can you repeat the process for that, please?
Certainly, that's via our public view system that directly ties into our noise monitoring software. If you go to the airport's website, flysba.com, and you navigate to the Noise Advisory Program webpage, on there you can find a link where you can go online and create an account for real-time flight information, as well as submitting complaints associated with any flight that happens to be occurring over your home at the time. So wonderful. All right. So on to our last presentation for the evening. I wanted to bring to the commission an update on the task force working group progress that's occurred since we last spoke. And if we can get started with the slides. So just real quickly to recap on all of the outreach that's occurred to date. As we all know, this has been an ongoing topic and has received a lot of attention. We've specifically discussed this starting back in 2017 when the new regulations went into effect that affected flying club operations and the ability to receive instruction within those flying clubs for compensation. So the commission took this item, voted on it in 2017, ultimately sent it to City Council where it was adopted with the November 29th, 2017 update. So following that 2018, this is when the information started to come out about potential inequities with the different stakeholders on the airfield. Airport received a letter requesting that we take a close look at our fees to make sure that it's not creating an unlevel playing field or a violation of our grant assurances. Since then, I'm not going to go through each meeting, but you can see this has been a recurring topic of discussion that was unfortunately impacted after our public engagement meetings occurred in 2020 when the COVID crisis hit us. So we did hold some initial public stakeholder meetings, and then we've been back to discuss this with the commission regularly in each of our meetings. But again, going back to the task force working group, you can see here that we had our initial meeting in May, followed by 3 consecutive Wednesdays where we held the each focused meeting for the varying stakeholders that are impacted. And you'll see that here on our next slide, kind of talking about the actual completion of those meetings and who those meetings were focused on. So again, that being the flight school, the flying clubs, and then the independent operators that are providing instruction. Next slide, please. If we could go to the next slide 4, please. There we are. So who made up the task force working group for us to discuss flight instruction? It was facilitated by Airport Management Consulting Group, Mr. Bob Trimborn, who has a wealth of experience in aviation management and has been consulting since he retired from the Santa Monica Airport as airport director. We also had airport administration representatives such as myself and our operations team. We had independent flight instructors as they were one of the focus groups. Above all, aviation representatives to represent the flying school, and then 2 individual flying clubs, Channel City and Santa Barbara flying clubs. Next slide, please. And I just want to real quickly show the definition of each of these. I think this is important, and this is something that's been touched on in each of the meetings that Mr. Trimborn facilitated. What exactly is each of these entities? And it's important to distinguish a flight school and that they lease land from the airport and provide flight training services, specifically to the public by holding themselves out and advertising. We also have independent flight instructors who do not lease land from the airport, but are permitted by the airport to provide flight instruction. And then we have flying clubs where you're not holding yourself out to the public as a place to learn to fly, but it's essentially a group of individuals that will come together and have a shared ownership of an airplane. Again, I referenced the change to the regulation that occurred in the 2016-2017 timeframe, and that really affected this group, which caused some concern about equities on the airfield and fair and unjust discrimination. Next slide, please. So again, what were the goals of the meetings? Well, we wanted to come together, define our objectives, and general meeting availability. This was all handled in the kickoff meeting. We got into each meeting specifically on the task force working group here, where we discussed the airport minimum standards and how they apply to each operator or each stakeholder group. The current minimum standards, FAA policy, and in the end, we still hold the belief that all three can operate successfully on the field, but we have to level that playing field. However, at the end of the day, the airport must have regulatory compliance. And that is one of the primary discussion points of the task force working group is how do we move forward, accommodating each of these groups and ensuring the airport can maintain regulatory compliance requirements. And then at the conclusion of each meeting, focused discussion and presentation by that designated group. And I'll get into each one of those in just a moment. Next slide, please. So again, flight school meeting, I've already kind of hit on some of these points, minimum standards, FAA policy, and the student's preferences, whether or not the student wants to go through a flight school or they decide they want to be a part owner of an airplane. Really this gives the student options if they want to go through that flying school. We talked about the facility payments, as I shared, equity, and how does each operator come into compliance. But no matter what the operation is, it must be compliant with our minimum standards. That was made very clear through the entire process. At the end, as I mentioned, we gave each entity the opportunity to talk about whatever presentation they felt would be relevant for the entire group so we could come to a common understanding, or at least a better understanding of what each group does in a controlled environment. So really for the flight school, what they did was they talked about their goals and objectives and providing instruction to the general public here at the airport and operate a successful business. Next slide, please. So following that, we moved on to the flying clubs. Again, much of this is the same as before, but we talked about what are non-compliant flying clubs. We examined other airports in the region, in the United States, where there have been flight clubs that have been disguised, or flight schools rather, let me rephrase, flight schools that have been disguised as flight clubs just by the name of a flight club. So some of that does exist, and we just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. All property rights of the members of that club must be equal, and an individual of that club is considered part of the entity of a flying club itself. That's by FAA definition. And again, compliance with minimum standards is a must. The flying clubs kind of took this as a joint opportunity for their presentation. They shared a lot about their club history, and they examined their regulations and understanding of the regulations in the FAA Compliance Manual 5190.6 Bravo, their interpretation of that, which was also discussed with Mr. Bob Trimborn's interpretation of that, and then finally FAA interpretation. Next slide, please. And then we moved on to the independent flight instructors in our final meeting. We talked about unjust discrimination, yet again, our grant assurances, airport lease rates versus non-aeronautical lease rates for the varying forms. Being that they are an independent flight instructor, they're not on the airfield paying aeronautical rates. They're simply paying for that permit. And we also talked about airport revenues. This was a little bit more leaning towards that flight school piece. And how do we come up with those lease rates? And it's fair market value and demand for services. And that's looked at broadly for all properties that I know our team manages here, but that's how it works for the flight schools as well. One of the key points that was brought up by one of the independent instructors is the barriers to providing levels of service. It's very difficult from their perspective to operate as an independent on the airport because they don't have the ability to advertise as a place to learn to fly. And they're often limited as to where they can provide certain types of instruction. For example, our independents are not allowed to provide instruction within the perimeter fence of the airport, which is a barrier from their perspective that the flight school does not have. So it was just taking a look at all the competing priorities. And again, that's really what their presentation spoke about, the different philosophies related to how individuals want to learn to fly and the pros and cons of each from their perspective. Next slide, please. So where are we at today following the meetings? We just received a draft report from Airport Management Consulting Group that's under review. It has all the findings, discussion points, and ultimately it really found that there was value and our goal was achieved, and that we brought all of our stakeholders together to discuss kind of what is occurring on the airport and how we can move forward in a compliant manner that's fair to all. No specific examples came out of those meetings, but we were all in agreement that we want to move forward together. It's just how are we going to do this in a manner that's going to be compliant? Next slide, please. So I'm not going to read each of these off, but these are the specific findings from the report. There were seven issues that were realized. This will be published in a final report. And if you want to just take a moment to look through these, you're not going to see anything that jumps out as alarming, but really we need to find a way for us all to have our compliance lanes that we're going to stay in at the end of the day. And that's, again, what we've been saying all along is that we have to come to agreement that the three of us are going to operate, three of them will operate in compliance, and the airport will operate in compliance. Next slide, please. So again, I spoke about general consensus that everyone wants to operate together to ensure fairness. Everyone's in agreement that we need to update our minimum standards to establish very clear compliance lanes. These need to be fair and equitable, in agreement by all. Current structure is not fair. That was agreed to. And that we have to update our minimum standards. So you'll see here on our next steps, we talk about what are these, what is the path to compliance and updates here. So as soon as we have the final report, we'll make that available. From there, we'll develop our minimum standards, bring that back to the commission, and this will kind of be a first round draft of what we intend to move forward with. And then we'll engage the public, hopefully in the month of October, and can come right back to the commission with the public's comments and what the proposed minimum standards update will be that we're going to ultimately take to City Council and seek approval by the end of this calendar year. So we still remain on track to complete this as originally shared in the prior commission meetings. Next slide, please. With that, I will be happy to field any questions or comments. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I was fumbling with my buttons. That didn't really come out the way I wanted, but anyway. Do we have any airport commissioner questions or comments? Looks like Carl is either swatting a fly or has a comment.
Aaron, thank you for the report and the details. I have both a question and a comment. Your definition of an independent flight instructor was that that instructor did not lease airport property. That's not my understanding of the definition of an independent flight instructor. My understanding is that an independent flight instructor is one who instructs in the student's airplane. They cannot instruct in their own airplane. And that's a big difference between an independent and a flight school. A flight school generally owns airplanes and gives flight instruction in their airplanes. An independent flight instructor, on the other hand, must only give instruction in the student's plane. Whether or not they lease airport property, as far as I know, is purely a matter of possibly an airport decision to allow or not to allow. I know in the past, I have heard several independent flight instructors say, I would love to rent a small office so that I could conduct ground school, flight training, talk to the people, meet the people, but I still have to teach in their airplane. So that's my comment on the definition, and I think it makes a huge difference in the way you presented this. The second item is in your list of issues from the consulting group. Items 4, 5, and 6 said the FAA does this, the FAA said this, the FAA agreed to this. Was the FAA involved in any of these series of meetings that you just talked about?
The FAA was invited to participate in the entire process, but decline to comment or participate. They're looking for the airport to bring a solution forward.
So when you say the FAA supported this or the FAA did not support this, contends that permit is economical, concerned about the management and identified problems, from what does that stem?
Well, I'm not sure the specific issue. I don't have them readily available in front of me. We could always flip back to that slide if you'd like me to address one more specifically.
And so let me just comment on that, if you would. So many of those comments that you're looking at in that bullet point were driven directly from the letters that we received from the FAA. So they're not assumptions that we're making. They're statements of fact that were pulled from the letters we received from the FAA in 2017, 18, and I believe 2020.
Thank you very much. I would request, Aaron, that at the next presentation, as we progress, that those letters be made available as part of the presentation or as an attachment to the presentation. That's all of my comments and questions. Thank you.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, first off, thanks for working this very difficult problem. My question is, does it seem like all three types of businesses are going to be able to function here at our airport successfully?
I believe so. Again, that is the general belief of all parties, is once we have those updated minimum standards with the clear compliance lanes and we've leveled the playing fields, we should all be able to function appropriately here at Santa Barbara.
Thank you, Aaron.
And I'll just add to that is our goal. We do believe that all three of these groups can coexist, but there are rules that will have to be followed in order for that to be necessary. And we have to have rules that are enforceable. So we can't come up with, rules that rely upon, the faith that people are just going to comply. That's kind of where we've been before. And so the draft updates that we come up with will be very specific as to, what the rule is and where that line is that you're crossing. Everyone follows the rules. We should be fine. We wouldn't be here now if everyone were kind of staying in their own area, so to speak. So again, we believe they can coexist, but it's going to take some give and take on the part of all of them, and everyone's going to have to follow the rules.
That's all I had to say.
Any other commissioners? I have a question, but I'll wait to see if any other commissioners. Okay, Aaron, you might have had it on the slide. When is the next meeting on that subject?
So the task force working group has concluded. We're just now receiving the report, which will eventually be finalized as a result. So there is not another meeting scheduled today other than what will be the October commission meeting, where we hope to have a rough draft put together of where we intend to go with the minimum standards. So that the next commission meeting will be the next opportunity.
And there is isn't there a public engagement process at some point?
That's correct. That will take place in the month of October is what we're currently anticipating.
Got it. Have we announced those dates and times yet?
Not as of yet. Not as of yet.
All right, thanks, Aaron. I don't have any other questions. And Mo, I'd ask you to call for public comment, and I would just like to remind the public that 3 minutes would be very much appreciated by the speakers who will come after you. And so looking for any public comment on this administrative report.
Members of the public, if you would use your raised hand icon to indicate you want to speak, please do so now. I have unmuted everyone, so when I call on you, Daryl Eaton, you are the first member to speak. If you would unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Yes, hi, this is Daryl Eaton. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. So my name is Daryl Eaton. I'm the secretary of the Santa Barbara Flying Club. First, I would like to say, Aaron, thank you so much for putting together the task force. It actually was great to meet with you and Bob and all of the rest of the stakeholders. And I would actually suggest that we continue to do it even after the minimum standards are adopted, just to, air anything in advance and try to keep working on this together. It looks like we'll have about a month to review the proposed minimum standards, which I appreciate. I just wanted to ask that we do get ample time to review and comment on it. And I did see on issue number 1 on the thing here, it says flying clubs are permitting independent flight instructors who are not club members to conduct flight training activities utilizing flying club aircraft. This is probably one of the areas that we do need guidance on. We've been told, hey, they can't be a member of the club, or this seems to imply that they should be members of the club. So, and then if you look at, the amendment to 5190.6b, that implies that instructors can be members of the club and they can either be compensated by flight time or by monetary compensation. So I think guidance there is going to be key. I think what I do want to say though is that yes, we all came together and we all do want to function here together successfully. I mean, the club's been on the airport for over 70 years. So really looking forward to those clear guidelines and to continue to communicate together afterwards as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eaton. Chair, Vince Merstick, would you please unmute your mic and begin speaking?
Hello, I believe I'm currently unmuted. Is that correct?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
This issue can have a major impact on many users of the airport. And I'd like to remind the commission that in the past, several commissioners, as well as many in the public, have asked that this be an open process and that there be plenty of time, adequate time, for the public to respond. And the public are the people who are going to be affected by this. And I'd like to reiterate the need for the airport department to notify all potentially affected users. And this has come up many times, but I've never seen it actually followed through. In particular, all pilots currently operating at the airport and all aircraft owners at the airport, as well as the general public in Santa Barbara, needs to be informed of this. And I think you folks have the ability to do this. You have, for example, a list of all the people and their contact information that have airplanes based at the airfield. I believe you all, in fact, I know you also have a list of all people who have badges to access the airport. And in addition, the FAA, I believe, provides a list of all people living in Santa Barbara that own airplanes in Santa Barbara. And I think as a minimum, you folks should make a serious effort at notifying these people as to what you're proposing. And I think in doing so, they should have sufficient time to read and digest what you're proposing. This is it's a fairly complex issue that has gone on for years. And most recently, you folks have spent months working up what eventually will be a draft. And I don't think it was reasonable to send out a draft and expect good input if you don't allow enough time. And I think more than a month, certainly more than a month, is needed for people to respond to this detailed report that you're going to provide. So I'll close with that. I won't use all my time, but I think that this is a very important issue that you get inputs from everybody. Because if you don't, and there's people who object, there will be legal complaints made with the FAA, and the city's money that's collected from the FAA, the grant monies, will be jeopardized. So I think it's a very important issue, and I hope you folks address it accordingly. Thank you.
Chair R. Curry, I do not see any other raised hands.
Alrighty. Well, thank you, airport staff, commissioners, and if any of our elected officials are still with us, or any members of the public are still with us, thank you very much for attending this lengthy meeting. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting.